Dear guests, dear friends, welcome today to the European Parliament. I am very happy to host this debate because I think it's a very, very important theme. And although in the European Parliament, in the different political groups, we don't get along every time on each topic, however, on a very, very important topic, we are always on the same page. And that topic is human rights. We are very concerned at the European level on what is happening with the European money sent to other countries from outside the European Union, because we have a duty towards our voters and towards the European citizens to prioritize their interests first. And of course, while helping other nations and other countries, we must make sure that the European money sent there doesn't get used and sent for example, financing terrorist organizations or breaches of human rights and so on and so forth. Therefore, we must have a serious debate on the case of Pakistan. And I'm very happy for having this opportunity to host this event, and I want to especially thank to our friends from EU Today. They had this amazing initiative, and I believe it will be a fruitful occasion for us to get to certain conclusions. Now, on the GSP Plus, the European Union's Generalized Scheme of Preferences Plus, we all know that it links duty-free access to the European Union markets with demonstrable, verifiable progress on international norms. It refers to implementing 27 binding conventions, so each country who wants to obtain this preferred status must fulfill 27 binding conventions which cover human rights, labor rights, environmental protection, and of course, good governance. Pakistan was granted this special status in 2014, gaining a privileged access to the majority of its exports to the European markets. In only 1 year, in 2015, Pakistan had already doubled its exports, bringing a huge boost to the Pakistan economy. This proves how important it is, this program, for Pakistan. However, the access to GSP Plus is not forever, is not granted forever. So the European Commission's GSP Plus review cycle ends this year in 2025, and the EU faces a choice, either to continue on the GSP Plus path for Pakistan or to suspend it under the regulation EU number 9078 from 2012. Besides that, EU grants some money to Pakistan. We are talking about 100 million euro every year for development and cooperation. And this is additional to the GSP Plus. It's free money, it's granting, taken again from the pockets of the European citizens and gifted to Pakistan. And all Pakistan has to do is to respect human rights and to use the money properly according to their purpose, meaning for development and cooperation. Still, instead of having less and less cases of human rights breaches, unfortunately the situation in Pakistan is getting worse day by day, and diplomatic dialogue remains resultless at this moment. Among the worst violations of human rights currently taking place in Pakistan, we can discuss about the misuse of blasphemy laws, we can discuss about the enforced disappearances and torture, we can discuss about the persecution of religious minorities, including Christians, and we can discuss about attacks on journalists, on civil society, and of course on opposition figures through the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act, violating the freedom of expression and association. So I believe the debate we are having today is very important. We can deliver a strong message to Pakistan and to all third countries in similar conditions and situations, EU is open and willing to help a lot, but certain things must be respected, and among them, human rights occupy the first conditionality. Dear guests, thank you so much for being here. I will pass the floor to our friend, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. GSP Plus, why are we interested in this as a news agency? EU Today is very much a campaigning news and current affairs site, and being in the European Parliament for some 20 years, we've become very much aware of how important human rights is in every single policy area. This, however, as you pointed out there, it's failing miserably. The situation is getting worse. And so we started to dig, we started to look, how much worse can this get? We found evidence of EU Commission money going to fund madrasas, training schools for terrorists. The Commission admitted it, but said it was not responsible for how the money it gives is spent. This is not good enough. This is simply not good enough. This is our money, our taxes, funding the training of terrorism. Most of the leaders of the Taliban go through madrasas. So we decided, having spoken to a lot of people, parliamentarians, human rights campaigners and others, that we need to find a way of getting this message out there in some way that the public would understand, not too technical, not too frightening, but really explaining the situation. And so we decided to put together a documentary, which we would like to show now. The documentary, which I hope you found informative and interesting, has been shown in the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva and also at the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. And we are hoping to show at the House of Commons or House of Lords before the end of this year. To follow this up, we decided to really look at the legal implications. How is the European Commission failing legally in its duty to make sure that our money is spent correctly, but also that Pakistan is actually enacting these many 27 protocols on human rights? We learned really through examining how the Commission operates and the EU in general, that the EU institutions, they don't communicate the way we do. We communicate verbally, by email, by telephone, in meetings. The institutions commute through documents. They produce white papers, they produce resolutions, all such things, and these are passed around. And so we thought, well, we'll get into the game here. So this was produced. This is a white paper on assessment of Pakistan's non-compliance with GSP Plus obligations, a case for suspension. I was very pleased, having distributed this by email, so they do read the email sometimes, that the European Commission has accepted this, and they are going to include this in the evidence that they will be examining in the consultation which is due to begin now. I mentioned at the end of the documentary that in Britain the membership of Pakistan of the Commonwealth of Nations is now being debated. Pakistan has been twice suspended. Should it be suspended again or should it be expelled? I personally would argue for expulsion. And I think that that would cause Pakistan a great deal of problems economically, but also politically. We have had one piece of good news to report, and that was back in June of this year. The Commission suspended the preferences that Pakistan enjoys over ethanol. Pakistan was a major exporter of ethanol to the EU. That's finished now. That was damaging the European ethanol industry to such a degree that the Commission did actually take some action there. You've heard from our MEP, you've heard from me and from human rights campaigners here, but I'd like to actually give the floor to somebody who really knows what this situation means to the man and woman in the street. We're very honoured today to be joined by Dr. Naseem Baloch, who is the chairman of the Baloch National Movement. Dr. Baloch, may I give the floor to you?
Thanks. Thanks a lot for having me. Honourable members of the European Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving voice today to one of the most silenced and persecuted nations of our time, the Baluch people. Your presence here is not symbolic. It is a statement to the world that the suffering cannot be hidden behind borders and that the human dignity remains a universal concern. I stand before you not as a representative of the Baluch national movement, but as a witness to a decades-long humanitarian tragedy that continues with alarming intensity. In a region rich in resources but deprived of rights, the Baluch people are living through one of the South Asia's most persistent and least recognized human rights crises. In recent years, Pakistan's security establishment has intensified its campaign of repression. Peaceful political leaders, students, human rights defenders, and political activists are targeted with a ferocity meant to silence an entire generation. Among the brightest of that generation was Chairman Zubair Baloch, a young leader whose only weapon was his voice. He delivered in dialogue, in democratic rights, in peaceful political struggle. His life was ended with bullets. A message that any emerging Baloch leadership will be extinguished before it can grow. His death is not just a tragedy, it is a reflection of policy. Since March 2025, BYC, Baluch Yakyati Committee, is a known group for the human rights. Its activists have been repeatedly harassed, arrested, and detained under fabricated charges. Even their public gatherings and peaceful marches have been met with violence. Enforced disappearances remain the darkest feature of life in Baluchistan. In last 3 months of 2025 alone, 234 new cases of enforced disappearances were recorded. Women such as Nasrina Baloch and Mahjabeen Baloch, abducted earlier this year, they remain missing. Thousands of Baloch people have been forcibly disappeared over 2 decades, and thousands killed in custody. Mass graves discovered in different regions over the last decade. In Dasht, near the capital city of Baluchistan, Quetta, a cemetery known as the Cemetery of the Unknowns holds hundreds of unidentified bodies, sons, brothers, fathers who vanished only to reappear as nameless remains. This is not just a narrative invented by political movements. These violations have been documented by UN working groups, Amnesty International, Frontline Defenders, and major international news organizations. The world cannot claim ignorance. The evidence is overwhelming. In recent months, the crisis has taken an even more dangerous turn. Pakistan has deployed armed drones over Baluchistan, targeting civilian areas. In Zahri, an area in Baluchistan, drone attacks killed 4 children and several other civilians. Villages that once feared checkpoints of the army now fear the sky itself. This is not counter-terrorism. It is the use of advanced weaponry against an unarmed population. It is a war crime. In last 3 months, 22 extrajudicial killings carried out by a police department called Counter-Terrorism Department and state-backed death squads also. Many of these individuals have been previously disappeared. Their bodies mutilated and bearing marks of torture were returned to their families. These are not isolated incidents, but a pattern of state behavior. Alongside physical violence, Pakistan has suffocated political space in Baluchistan. Peaceful protests are criminalized. Parties are banned. Leaders are pushed into exile or eliminated. Even mothers holding silent pictures of their missing children are labeled security threats. To weaken the secular and democratic Baloch movement, the state has empowered religious extremist groups in the region. This deliberate strategy seeks to fracture society, undermine progressive voices, and destabilize the region, a strategy whose consequences extend far beyond Baluchistan. Yet, despite all this, Baluchistan is not poor in resources. Billions of minerals are extracted every year to fuel those companies which are beneficiaries of GSP Plus scheme. Yet, communities lack clean water, reliable schools, and basic infrastructure. This is not development. This is the continuation of colonial extraction under military occupation. And Baluchistan suffers the deepest wounds other marginalized nations and communities like Pashtuns, Sindhis, Kashmiris, Christians, Ahmadis, Hindus, and the people of Gilgit-Baltistan also. They face the similar patterns of enforced disappearances, arbitrary detention, and political repression. This reflects not a regional issue, but a structural one. Honorable members, this brings me to the role of the European Union. Pakistan continues to benefit from the European Union's GSP Plus scheme, a mechanism designed to promote compliance to international human rights, labor standards, and good governance. Yet Pakistan has systematically violated these very conditions. When a state engages in enforced disappearances, drone attacks on civilians, torture, mass graves, and political repression, it cannot be treated as compliant. The credibility of the GSP Plus framework depends on its willingness to enforce the standards it demands. Nothing erodes a value-based foreign policy faster than rewarding violations with preferential access to European markets. I ask this Parliament to give full weight to the findings of the UN working groups and the calls of Amnesty International and frontline defenders. I ask you to reassess Pakistan's GSP Plus status in light of overwhelming evidence. I ask you to demand transparency, accountability, and measurable human rights improvements. And I ask you to support an independent investigation into enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and mass graves in Baluchistan. Despite decades of violence, the Baluch people continue to resist peacefully, intellectually, and politically. Our struggle is not against any nation. It is against oppression, exploitation, and the denial of basic humanity. Your presence here gives us hope that the world has not turned its back, hope that justice can still prevail, and hope that the suffering of our people will not be allowed to remain invisible. The Baluch people seek what every nation seeks: freedom, dignity, and right to self-determination. Today, I ask Europe to stand with us, to stand with human rights, and to stand with freedom. I thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Baluch, thank you very much. It's hard, ladies and gentlemen, to imagine that in the 21st century, not only are we hearing stories like this, but through our taxes, with the help of the European Commission, we're funding it. The European Parliament needs to act. It needs to act quickly and decisively. And we should not just be talking about a suspension, we should be talking about an expulsion. I'd like to give the floor to anybody else who might like to make a comment or a question, if we have any questions or comments. No. Nigel Goodrich.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your very enlightening and alarming comments and presentation. And thank you, Gary, for the film as well. And congratulations that the white paper has been received by the European Commission. The EU temporarily withdrew GSP Plus from Sri Lanka, didn't it, in 2010, and from Myanmar in 2021 for far fewer human rights violations than we see today in Pakistan. Why do we think Pakistan is being treated as a special case?
I suppose the obvious answer is that Pakistan is a nuclear power. But I think that, Nigel, I don't know. I asked the same question. Is it about efficient lobbying, effective lobbying? I don't believe it is. I really don't know. I'm very cynical about the whole GSP Plus concept. In itself, it's excellent. It really is. But it's clearly not quite working as intended, as we intended, as the taxpayer would intend, as the parliamentarians here in the European Parliament would intend. But as the Commission intends, it works. It gets them lots of good headlines. It gets them headlines about how Europe is helping to bring stability, helping to improve human rights in Southeast Asia, helping to address abuse of women, religious intolerance. Through GSP Plus, this is what the European Commission is doing. And we see that headline over and over again. And we'll see it again. If there is no suspension, we will see again about how the European Commission, not our taxes, not the parliamentarians, not all the aid workers, how the European Commission is helping to make everything right. I'm very cynical, I know, but I have been in here for 21 years and I draw my own conclusions.
May I? The Commission hides behind ongoing dialogue and technical assistance. I wonder how many more enhanced monitoring missions, roadmaps, scorecards do we need before we acknowledge that Pakistan has zero political will to reform as long as the money keeps flowing?
I think you're absolutely correct, Nigel. I think another thing that we can add to this is a fear of being accused of Islamophobia. Because these days it's very, very easy to throw such labels around. You can be anti-Semitic, you can be Islamophobic. it's a word that everybody's afraid of. And it's very, very easy to throw out. That might be something else. Maybe they're concerned about this. I don't know. Certainly, I think that in the British case, fear of being labelled as Islamophobic might prevent any kind of suspension or expulsion from the Commonwealth of Nations, which is a very great shame. The Commonwealth of Nations is a great thing. Began, of course, as the British Commonwealth, and before that known as the British Empire. It's evolved into something which is supposedly very positive, that gives the smallest of nations, and some members of the British Commonwealth or the Commonwealth of Nations are islands with tiny, tiny populations. But maybe it's time for a change in the way that the Commonwealth is structured and indeed how it behaves. And now would actually be the time, because of course the Commonwealth was one of Her late Majesty's great passions. She believed very, very strongly in the Commonwealth. Sadly, she's no longer with us, so now might be the right time for King Charles to step up to the plate and to actually make a big statement by addressing the problems of Pakistan. Philip de Winter.
Yes, let me introduce myself. I'm Philip de Winter, I'm a member of Parliament. I think that in Europe we are very well aware that Pakistan is a terror state. They are hosting, financing and facilitating international terrorist groups on their soil. And when it comes to Europe, we are also under threat because Pakistan is also organizing terrorist attacks over here in Europe. Not only terrorist attacks, but they are also responsible for the radicalization of a lot of young Muslims over here. In my hometown in Antwerp, one of the biggest mosques is a Pakistani mosque funded by Pakistani government, with all sorts of radical preachers, imams coming over from Karachi almost every month. So we are very, very well aware of that, and it's not only concern about human rights, it's also the concern about Pakistan being responsible for terrorism on our soil. But I think that one of the reasons, it's Islamophobia and nuclear power and so on, but it's also that the Americans, I just came back from India a few days ago, where I assisted the remembrance conference of the 26/11 attacks on Mumbai. And they had an attack also a few weeks ago in Delhi. A much larger attack was prevented, but still there was an attack who injured a lot of people and killed about 10. But nevertheless, I think that the influence of the United States of America is very important. They want this military base on Pakistani soil, and I think that the Europeans are a little bit afraid at this moment to take action, for example, to suspend the GSP Plus just because they don't want to affect the Americans at this moment. I think it's part of the game at this moment, and we have to be aware of that. But nevertheless, I think that in European Parliament, certainly our group, and it's not ECR, we work together with ECR very well, and I'm very thankful and grateful that ECR hosted this conference. But that also our group, the Patriots group, who is one of the largest groups, together with ECR in European Parliament, and maybe we can find some majority with the Christian Democrat group and other conservatives to find a majority to suspend the GSP Plus. I think that's possible. It will take some time, of course, but nevertheless there is an opportunity, I think. And okay, the initiative is taken by EU today. The white book is spread, and let's hope for the best.
Okay. Philip, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's time to wrap up now. I hope that we've given you something to think about. And what I really want to just stress is that the time for action, time for action is now upon us. The time for words, of which we've already had too many from the European Commission, is over. Thank you.